that is many in Germany, I don't know, in Germans in Canada, I'm not sure, but it's very often this trend. Or Chinese in other countries, you would bring a Chinese partner, very strong. So you have emigration when people leave, and you have immigration when people come. And then there's also something that's called remigration. How to explain that now? So if you study, for example, China right now, the rise of China in innovation, technology, and so on, well, it is mainly due to a return of a lot of ethnic Chinese, the overseas Chinese. They have studied abroad, they have lived abroad, perhaps several generations. And China is pushing to get them back, the most talented, right? So there is something like remigration, which is occurring. And then you have something, well, with the internal migration within a country. If you move from, for example, Sochi to Moscow, that would be interregional, right? You move from Krasnodarsk, right, to Moscow, which is an interregional migration. If you would move within Moscow, that would be intra-regional, right? These are just a few definitions, and you could continue, but I will skip that. Then a very defining question would be, how do you define an international migrant? Well, how would you call someone who leaves, well, who does something like me? I go to another country, I live there, but basically every month I'm away for at least 1 to 2 weeks because I travel so much. I'm sometimes not sure if I really count as an international migrant, because there is this concept that you move to another country and basically you stay there, right, and you become part of that new country, right? So in the 18th century, the whole myth was like people went on a ship, they emigrated to the US, and then they became US citizens, and perhaps in the first year they sent each month perhaps a letter back to where they came from, and at some point there were less and less letters. At the beginning perhaps they also sent money, but it calmed down, right? Because each letter took like 4 months again on the ship to go back, and then yeah, people got tired. Nowadays with social media or all that, Facebook and so on, you can keep connections, right? And that's why it's so interesting that, for example, the Russian-speaking community in Germany, which is ethnic German and also Russian, right? They can keep contact with Russia through social media, because it's all available, right? It's all available, which didn't exist in the past. So these people live in another country, but they are well connected to their home country, right? Which is really different. So the United Nations would define someone only if you stay abroad for a year at least. Then they would call this person an international migrant. And this is now a problem because many countries simply in their statistics, they count people differently. Give you an extreme example, Germany, every time an international migrant moves, they would report that. Regardless if the person only moves for 1 week or 5 months, they would always report to the United Nations another international migrant, another case, another case. So the number goes actually up, while other countries are much more conservative. So you have also these interesting people here. I always show that in Canada and they start laughing because all of them, they have grandparents and many of them live actually, they live mostly 9 months of the year, they live in the US, in Florida, because Canada is simply too cold, so they move there and they are called the snowbirds. And now Canada is basically cracking down on these people because they want to have them pay their taxes properly. And the US is also interested because they live 9 months of the year in the US, right? They could be taxed there and not in Canada. So more and more systems are now introduced to track people. So for example, in Canada we have universal health care for free, right? In the US you don't have that. So these Canadians, they have their health care and bring it to the US, And of course, the Canadian taxpayer, they don't like that if all the elderly people live in the US but want to have all this money, right? So they want to attract people. And now they are like senior citizens that suddenly are caught in the border guards just tell them like, you have been abroad more than 6 months, you have to pay taxes in the US now. And the issue is if you paid once in your life taxes in the US will follow you the rest of your life. Because the United States is a country that actually taxes everyone, so for the rest of the life. So you have to always make a tax declaration, which is complicated and costly. And yeah, for example, if you, Germany, Russia, Canada, Russia, and so on, we have agreements to avoid double taxation. So I live, you know, I earn money here in Russia, let's say, and I live in Canada. So there's a bilateral agreement between the two countries which simply says the person lives there, pays taxes there. So I have to say, yes, I paid taxes in my country, right? I have to make sure, right? But he would not tax me in both countries. So the US is doing that. So you don't want to, yeah, and these old people get into this problem. What is also an interesting question is then, how long will you stay a migrant? How long will they call you an international migrant, right? So with the ethnic Germans that came once from Soviet Union to Germany and got the passport for free, basically, we still look at them as migrants, but they are statistically and legally, they are German citizens. They are not citizens of the Soviet Union or Russian Federation or other countries of the post-Soviet countries. But we would call them. We call people that live since 3 generations in Germany, we call them immigrants or aliens. They are Turkish. They have perhaps even a German passport. Some people have perhaps 2 passports, right? So in Canada it's extreme. I once had a student, she had 8 passports. I was wondering, 8 passports, right? So many people get a bit anxious when someone has so many passports, right? Because I mean, I think it's a genuine question then, to which country is that person loyal, right? If it comes, right? So many countries are actually really interested to keep it very limited. So in Germany, for a long time, you were not allowed to have a second citizenship. Now it's changing. In Canada, I know many people that have 3, 4 passports. It's like very common. In some countries, they are having a really strict principle. It's ius sanguinis. It means, well, if your parents are German, you are a German, regardless wherever in the world you are born, right? So my son was born in Canada. He's a German, he got directly German passport. But Canada has the other principle, ius soli, which means every child born on the soil of Canada becomes Canadian citizen. And these 2 principles don't override, right? So the thing is, he is both Canadian and both German, and they could not say only German. While if you are Russian and you go to Canada, it's very interesting. Canada and Russia have an agreement since many, many years, decades, years, historically. You can have dual citizenship. You can be Russian and Canadian. Yeah? This is possible. But Germany and Canada, no, because they cancelled that when we had the Third Reich. Right? They cancelled that agreement. We still have it, and we don't have it. So you have to have a lawyer, and you have to make a special case why you want to keep both nationalities. I would have to give back my German passport to get the Canadian. I tell you one thing, I would not give back my German passport because German passport is the most valuable in the world. You have actually, to most countries in the world, no visas. You have no visa requirement. So it's a very valuable passport. A German passport, also is a European Union passport, gives you access to the labor market of all European member states. You can work everywhere you want, right? Would I change that for Canadian citizenship? If I have to give up a German one? No, Probably not, right? So this is a tricky thing, because some people have to decide and have to make hard decisions. Very often there's also something, if they keep the Turkish citizenship, for example, some Turkish men, they do not go to Turkey. They would, on arrival, take them, put them in the military mandatory training, right? And they would have served them in both Germany in the military and in Turkey. Yeah, both NATO members, but I tell you, German military doesn't like that either, Turkish military doesn't like that either, if people serve in both militaries, right? Because, yeah, no, it's complicated. So in some countries you have then combinations of it. France is also a country with EU, so if you're born in France, you have it. If you are American, if you're born in America and the United States, you are by birth on American soil, you are American citizen as well. One thing is also, there are other forms of involuntary migration, and we could sometimes, yeah, it's not refugees, but it is actually, unfortunately, very, very sad topic. It's human smuggling and human trafficking. You might have heard about it. And there's a UN Palermo protocol from 2000 where this actually is defined, what is trafficking and what is smuggling. So trafficking means recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring or receipt of persons by means of threat of use of force, of other forms of coercion, of abduction, of fraud, of deception, of the abuse of power, or of a position of vulnerability. You have the slides, I guess. Or you give a payment or achieve the consent of the person for the purpose of exploitation. Very often it's sexual exploitation. And this is like very often it's trafficking in female. So forced labor or services, slavery, forced prostitution, or even removal of organs. So this is an important, unfortunately, very unfortunate type of migration as well, is human trafficking, where people, and very often women, very often young women and girls, are trafficked to another country. Very often the thing is like, let's find an example. Very often, let's say someone would see in the newspaper an advertisement, go to Germany, become an au pair, right? Or come to Germany and do this and that. Or people are, you know, you would go to a restaurant here in Moscow or in some other place and would say, oh, you could also work in Germany in a restaurant or in Italy in a restaurant and you would earn more money or something like that. And then these people believe, and then they go to Germany or Italy. And the first thing they do is to take away the passport, and then suddenly they are not in a restaurant or bar, they are in a strip club or in a brothel. And they cannot get out because this person has the passport, has the power. And so this is human trafficking. So this is something where people are very often, mostly women, actually then are also made promises and so on. And another form would be smuggling. And very often in the discourse they are confused, right? So they say like human trafficker, human smuggler. I give you a very easy example. If someone would like to go to another country, but it's very difficult to get into that other country. Let's say there's borders, you don't know how to get there, you don't have a visa, but you really need to go to this country. If you have enough money, someone could help you. It's organized crime, it's smugglers, right? They would take your money, put you perhaps in a car or in a truck, whatever. They know where to go, where there's no border guard, or they have paid bribes that the border guard, the truck is coming, the border guard just looks there at this side, right? So this is smuggling. But basically the person, if I wouldn't want to be smuggled, I would pay money to someone, this person would help me, I'm the client of this person, right? I give this money, and then, yeah, it's an exchange of service, basically. Other case would be human trafficking, and that is totally different. here the person is not paying. The person has no knowledge what happens to this person, right? So it's totally different situation. However, then there are these cases, I told you already, that there is this case of people at some point, they paid all the time, the smuggler, the smuggler, the smuggler. But let's say at some point there was a border security guard watching them, and this person was not corrupt and said like, hey, you, I detain you, and then this person gets sent back, deported. So the person runs out of money, and then, yeah, then there are type 2 smugglers that say, okay, you paid before with money, now you can't pay with money, okay, yeah, so here, you work in this bar, strip club, whatever, for months, and then I get this money, and then you can go the next step, right? And then they end up in a spiral not to get out of that anymore. Or you can sell part of your whatever organs, and I give you money for that, and this is the payment. So these things can also merge then. So if you look at statistics, and I take a break now, to give you 10 minutes break. Yeah, we would have 60 million refugees right now, and we have 258 million migrants, so far more people are international migrants. But speaking of world population, 7 billion people, well, very little is 3% of world population are international migrants. Right? So why is there so much crisis talk, right? Well, it's true. Since 2000, we have an increase of almost 50% of the international migrants. And half of the increase was in developed countries. This is significant. And of course, if you break it down then for world regions, if you look at Europe, in Europe the increase was far greater than in other regions, right? So you have to look at the regional picture, right? And so the number becomes relevant. So here are some statistics where you see, yeah, for example, in Europe the number jumped up. In Asia the number of international migrants jumped up. In Latin America not so much. In Pacific Australia not so much. Yeah, but you have the far highest increase in Asia actually, not in European Union, which is interesting. You have massive flows of immigration in Asian countries. Well, you know very well probably about some of these flows of people. Think about the Central Asian republics and Russia, because Russia is a magnet for people from the former CIS countries, right? It's a very important immigration country as well, the Russian Federation. And many people come actually from Central Asian republics as well, right? Labor migration, Tajikistan, for example, right? So this is then part of Asia then as well. So what is very interesting is also the increasing participation of women. We talked about that quickly with some examples. So for example, in the case of Poland, Germany, yeah, it's a lot of females, majority is female migrants from Poland. Because if you think now about the most preferred nationalities of German men when they marry a foreign partner, one is Poland, second is Russia, third is Ukraine, fourth is Serbia, right? It's the Slavic countries. Yeah. So it's like a lot of marriage migrations there. And you have also, and I mean, looking here in the room, you have a majority of women. If you look now in student population, students going abroad, for studies abroad, from Poland, from Russia, from other, are mostly female. And many of them married and so on. So it's like female migration is very important, especially among international students. Or au pair is definitely, absolutely, almost completely female, right? And au pair is a strategy for many women actually to get the first chance to go to another country. They go as au pairs, then they change status, they start to study, right? They fall in love and so on, and they stay and so on. This is a very known pattern for people that want to go to another country. Female migration. So what is very interesting with these 3% is the fact that the 3% of world population is almost stable since the 50s. So there was no massive increase of international migration because there was a massive increase of world population, which was far more important, the increase of world population. Right? So it's very relative if there's a migration crisis. It really depends to whom you speak and which country you speak. Because one key defining aspect of international migrants is also, well, you would only call a person an international migrant if this person has crossed an international border. This little chart here, starting 1945, ending year 2017, says how many United Nations states are there, member states, independent countries, right, recognized by the United Nations. In 1945, we had only 51. Today, we have more than 193 countries. So, world population went up way stronger, much stronger than international migrants. And also the number of independent countries went really like exponentially up over the decades, right? So it's even more relative, you know, international migrants statistically would be even less you know, relevant in this, from this perspective. Why does it matter at all? Why do we bother about international migrants, right? Well, what would you say? Very little percentage. Why are we concerned that people move to another country? What do you think? Why is it relevant? Why do we bother at all? Any idea? Well, one interesting, one easy example would be, well, is one person moving to another country can change a whole village, can change a whole society. You know, you need only little numbers, and I can tell you that the number of international migrants in China is currently less than 1%. But foreign experts, foreign talents in China are massively important for Chinese growth and innovation. Right? But a very, very small number is able to make an impact. And in other countries, well, if you are a family and you send one member abroad, just think about it. It changes your whole family. Only one person, right? You have perhaps in total 50 family members, counting everyone, including the cat and the dog and so on. But one person going abroad, right? You have other communications, you have financial transfers, you watch suddenly the news about this country, right? You do a phone call if there's something concerning or whatever. So it changes the whole logic of a community. If only one person goes. If you see now on the receiving side, well, if one person comes, this can change also the whole context of a receiving society, right? You have a growing number right now in Germany, for example, what makes the news. We have a growing number of populations, immigrant populations, that Germans were never used to have. Because German immigration for a long time was only Turkish or Slavic countries, right? And it's new for us in Germany that we have actually Central Asian migration, African migration even. So that's new, right? In the former East German part, they were totally not used to international migrants, right? Because there was hardly any international migrants. However, they were used to have international students, international migrants from Vietnam, from other places, right? They were used to that. But they were not used to Turkish, they were not used to Moroccans, they were not used to Muslim countries, right? So it's changing the whole fabric because these people just are not used to it. And so a little number, statistically totally insignificant, can change the whole system. Right? So we'll take a break now, 10 minutes, and we'll continue. And I will, after the break, first ask you if you have any questions. it's like in Canada, you say 10 minutes and it's 15, 20. It just start very slow. So we was just wondering if you have any questions or want to discuss some things we have here done in the past hour, something that is perhaps most interesting to you. Anything? Yeah?
You've mentioned that elderly people now are coming from US to Canada in order to get the free medicine help. And I've heard and read that there are more and more young people that are coming from US to Canada also because of high taxes and other reasons. And is it possible to say that Canada is becoming more, more likely country that people want to go to, to migrate because of the laws that allow to get there free if you want to, if you have a profession, probably. So the question is
yes. Very good question, and you're actually right. For example, if you think now about international students, Canada is becoming more and more important as a destination, more attractive for international students, because it starts in, most international students still go to the US, United States. But because the United States under Trump is so negative, restrictive, anti, and so on, other countries become more important. So the second most important country for international students to go to is United Kingdom, which now has Brexit. And we don't know the effects because many, well, if you move to UK or to the US, you know that you have to pay a lot of money to study there. So parents would think, well, if you go there, is there likelihood you can stay and get a job, right? And in the US, it's more difficult. In United Kingdom, it's not European Union soon anymore. So this investment you do as parents, or to invest in the future of your children, it's not calculable anymore. And countries like Canada become very important now, because there's another country, number 4 on the list would be Australia. And Australia is very restrictive on immigration as well. So especially if you think about Chinese or Asian or Iranian students, people that are really, well, either countries are not liked by the US, or they are Muslim countries, and they are targeted by the US. These people shift more and more to other countries. And it's very interesting because Canada, and you're right, is becoming really an important destination. And what is interesting about Canada is something, so Canada has the official policy each year to let 1% of the population immigrate. Canada allows every year 300,000 to 400,000 new people to come to Canada to become, at some point, Canadians. So they have targeted recruitment. They want to have immigrants. And you think about a big country which is not populated enough and gets old. We need to have 1% of the population renewed each year. That's the official policy of Canada. And then they target. So Canada picks the people they want to have. So they have each year, the government decides, let's say 20% humanitarian refugees, 30% perhaps marriage, migration, family migration, whatever, and then high-skilled migrants. And in Ottawa, where I live now, what is very interesting because my wife is Russian, we are very much connected to the Russian-speaking community in Ottawa. There are shops that are in Russian, everything is in Russian. We have cultural festivals and so on. And Russian-speaking means now really the former CIS countries. So it's all together, like the Ukrainians, the Russian, everyone who speaks Russian, so to say. Now you have a new immigration of Russians coming to Ottawa, and they are completely different from the rest, because these people are the high skilled of Russia or have studied in other countries. They come now to Canada. They relocate from the US or relocate from Europe to Canada. And these people are like, well, I have seen it in Ottawa at the airport. The family comes, they get the key to a multi-million-dollar house. They work in software, artificial intelligence, self-driving cars, because Ottawa has a technology sector which is very important. And it is really mostly Russian-speaking, high-skilled migrants, right, that are coming now. And of course you have the other community, and these Russian speakers, they came to Canada 20, 30, whatever, many years ago. And they look at these new people, and these new people, they come and they have completely other mindset, right? Well, multi-million-dollar house, they lived in Moscow before, they were always rich, now he is super rich. They don't mix with them, with the other Russian speakers, right? They are under, what are these people, right? So it's very, very strange. And then they have not the idea to become basically long-term citizens of Canada. They sit there and say like, yeah, well, why should I learn actually? Why should I learn French, right? Which is second language in Canada. And very often we meet these families, and they have these stories. And they want to have Russian language schools, and they have language schools, but it's totally different than from the other mix. Right? And yeah, this is, of course, in a way, yeah, a different process. But Canada is becoming really important, but it was always an important immigration country. But now, if you make now an investment choice, right? You want to send your children abroad for international studies. Where would you send them? Not in a country where, you know, something is strange is going on, right? You would think about a country which is stable, which allows you to stay. And so if you come as an international student to Canada now, you are already allowed as an international student to work 20 hours per week off campus. So you can work while you study. You get automatically right to work. After your studies, when you graduate, you have a work permit and a residence permit, which allows you for 1 year to look for a job. And you can become, in this 1 year, you can become permanent resident of Canada, right? And this is the next step, to become citizen. And Canada has all these policies to keep these people, because they think, well, they think clever to say like, well, these people have come here, they studied, they know how our country works, they have paid tuition, they have paid money, they have proven that they have a degree, that is a Canadian degree, we know what it is, right? And we want to keep these people. Before we bring in other people, we keep these people. And then if you apply in Canada for a job, it always says preferences given to Canadian citizens or permanent residents. So let's say a Russian international student going to Canada, working already during studies for a company, has it very easy to stay. And if a Russian would apply from Russia, they have less chances to get in, because that Russian in Canada would get a job, not someone outside, unless they have totally better qualifications and so on. Right? But it's very interesting, because they have a pathway, they say in Canada, a pathway to citizenship, which is interesting. And people that, you know, they think about these things, so it's really mattering. In the case now of Canada, what is also special? Well, if you go there as an international student, you manage to stay, you become permanent resident, and in this moment, if you have enough financial income, you can sponsor your parents to move to Canada. and then you can bring your parents. However, if you do that, you have to sign, you will be responsible for many years. So they do health checks and everything. So of course you think about this like, you think very long time about that, because let's say parents are already old, they would come to Canada and then you would need health system, whatever, you would have to pay first for them. So of course there are insurances you can pay, but it's all expensive, right? So you want to think about that before. But it's actually possible to swim immerse. Or, if you're there in Russia, if you're there in Canada as an international student, and you fall in love with someone back in your other country, you can sponsor that person to come, right? So you can also bring that person. Some people go there as well, and then they bring their children. And Canada has now, cut back on it, but many years there was no age limitation. They could have been adults already, the children. But now they kept it like, I think 18 years old, and younger they can come, but yeah. So some people bring, for example, the children of their former marriage to Canada, right? Because they are like their children, and then they sponsor them to come to Canada. So Canada has totally different policies, right? And a completely other mindset. We come to this actually. Have other questions? Don't be shy. Yeah, so otherwise I will continue and then ask you from time to time if there's a question. Also, really, if you have a question, just tell me or show me. Yeah. So what we do now is we talked really about politics, right? Because what we did before was a bit like, well, the introductions, right? Theory and so on, we looked at that, right? So now we look at the politics, and of course, what comes to mind is the border. That's US-Mexico border and the war, right? And you know about that whole thing. Build the wall and so on. We would already also again start with the question, which the question sounds really simple. It would be a simple question: why do states try to regulate migration? Why do we try to stop migration now in the case of the United States under Trump? Why are they so interested to stop migration? Or the European Union countries, why are they so interested to stop migration, refugee flows? So question to you, and I really ask you, what do you think are the reasons why a country is interested to regulate migration and to keep it restricted and so on? Yeah?
I think first of all we might note the economic reasons, as I think that many countries are not ready to contribute much money in the migration processes. So that's why, from my point of view.
Yeah. So very, just to phrase it a bit differently, so very often there's a discussion of what burden they bring, right? These people are perhaps then unemployed, don't contribute and so on. Yeah.
Another reason, the migration can start some social problems.
Yeah.
On some ethnic problems.
Yeah, exactly. Hello, yeah. So right now in Germany, for example, what is really a problem is that there are refugee centers in Germany, and we have more and more media reports about, German young women raped or students raped by some of the refugees, right? Because these refugees are all put together in one center, males only, right, and so on. And there are like cultural differences, and there's a lot of problems right now. Speaking, in again statistically terms, it's very difficult in this education. Of course, 99.999%, right, don't do that, right? But there are some people that do such things, right? And these things are then in the media. and it's really a social problem, right? And there are cultural differences, and well, they like to have a girlfriend, and they approach a girl, and she is not used to this, and you know, many things can happen, right? This is like a really, it's about the role of gender, right, in this relation then, and how cultural differences are set with gender, right? So there are a lot of problems like that. There are also problems between groups, right? So we have, for example, a long-standing issue in Germany also between, well, we had guest workers from Turkey, recruited them, but of course members of the Turkish guest workers, many of them are either Turkish or Kurdish, right? And when Kurdistan, the independence movement and so on, it plays out in Germany. They make demonstrations in Germany, right, the Kurdish, but now also the supporters of Erdogan. He mobilizes actually them inside Germany. And German politicians look at it and say, like, why do you mobilize your co-ethnics in Germany, right? We are Germany, right? So you live here since second, third generation. Why do you do that? So it's really a question about different groups and how they come together. And so it depends really also how the country defines itself. And we come to Canada in a second again when we talk about it. But a bit to the root now of this situation. Have you ever, you know, what constitutes a state actually? What are the elements of a state? When do you call something a state?
Taxes, laws.
Hmm?
Taxes, laws.
Yes, laws. Mm-hmm. A country has, yeah, so a country would usually have a currency, would have a government, would be recognized by other countries as being independent.
So there is a nation with territory.
Yeah. Territory.
Borders.
Borders, yes. So we actually there is something. This is the place where I lived before in Germany. It's called Osnabrück. Osnabrück is close to Münster. You don't know these places. You might, however, know something which is called the Westphalian nation-state. Ever heard about it? Yeah? The nation-state concept of Westphalia. The Peace of Westphalia was signed in 1648, and it ended 30 years of war. And it was actually religious war. So they defined, they concluded the Peace of Westphalia, and what evolved was actually, oh, my fault, sorry. This was the end. So the nation-state concept, what we call today, is very much connected to this concept of the peace treaty of Westphalia. And the elements of a nation-state are really like, you have government, you have population, and you have territory. So you have one population which lives on a designated territory. So very often, if there are border disputes between countries, right? And they go to the United Nations, and then like one country is perhaps not recognized because there's a border dispute, right? Borders are very important. Population is very important. So the nation-state concept in Russia, so Germany and Russia are actually very, very close to the Russian Federation, are very close to this concept. The idea would be, but it's not, it's actually a belief, right? It's an ideal nation-state concept. The idea would be that you have in one country with a clearly defined border, you have one government, and that government represents one ethnic group. Only one ethnic group. So, yeah, the Germans, right? That ethnically defined it. So each ethnic group would actually belong or have their nation state, right? But if you look in reality, most countries in the world are multi-ethnic, including Russian Federation, including also Germany. We're multi-ethnic. However, this concept was in a way very much that we have one country which is actually the country that belongs to one ethnic group, right? You have some countries like Japan, which is very restrictive, it's very hard to become a Japanese citizen. China as well. They are very strongly defined also as ethnic, homogeneous, and so on countries, right? Very strongly. The reality is that we have, due to colonialism and so on, we have inherited a lot of different ethnic groups, right? Russian Federation is simply also the same case. You have a lot of ethnic groups, right? So, however, there is this ideal or this belief there's one nation state, and it's important, well, it's important to control the borders, to know who comes in and goes out. This is actually, we call it, it's holy or sacrosanct for a country to protect its borders, to protect its population, to control it, because to keep control over the borders is constituting state sovereignty. And every time a border crisis, just think back, you know, when there were refugee crisis and came to European Union, Germany and so on, it was directly a crisis of the state. The states are like, you know, there's chaos. A state government has to demonstrate on a regular basis each day, right? Has to demonstrate that the country is independent, is sovereign, right? And one aspect where you see that is the border. We come to more aspects, what I ask you. Because you have an exclusive relation in it. You have the citizens, they are the full members. If you think now about a nation state as a club, they are the club members. If you're an immigrant, well, in other countries, in Germany, for example, they are called foreigners, or in the US, they're aliens, not aliens from Mars, but aliens. You do not belong, you know, from the state concept, right? You do not have rights. So over time, of course, there are certain rights. And going back to the Bible or whatever, you would have guest rights. Let's say in some communities it would be, you are under the roof of my house. If someone comes, I defend you, I protect you, right? I keep you protected, but you are a guest. Means at some point you go again, right? So you have guest rights. Or like free passage, right? This evolved like historically, that you had a laissez-passer, like a French, you know, in French the name for it, to let you pass, right? So Giacomo Casanova and these guys, they had like a document and they traveled around. It was actually a visa. They were granted by the authority to pass, right? They went to their monarch, they issued the document, yeah? And so they were able to go to another country, but they were not included, they were not citizens, they were guests, right? So it's important, because there is a strict line between citizen and non-citizen. So a country would try to protect its borders, to not let people in just like freely, as a means to control it. And the second instrument would be citizenship. For example, let's say we are Japan or we are Germany, we are very restrictive and we make it very hard that people become citizens. Control it. We want to keep it really controlled. In the most extreme case, we say, you have to prove that your parents, your grandparents, and whatever are all, you know, from that ethnic group, and only then become a citizen, right? This would be the extreme. In Germany was for a long time the extreme. Japan is very much the extreme. In China, it's almost impossible as a non-Chinese to become a citizen, right? It's changing, definitely, probably, but it's very much this concept. If you belong to this ethnic group, you can become, right? And then there are groups, they live in a country, and they are not recognized as citizens, though they always lived in that. And one case right now, very often in the news, it's the Rohingya in Malaysia, the Rohingya crisis, you heard about it, right? So in Burma, in Myanmar, right? So there is a group simply not recognized by the ethnic majority. Yeah, if there's an ethnic group that owns the country, right, and defines it as an ethnic state, if there's a minority they do not accept, then they might even say they are not citizens, they are stateless, right? So they use that. And in the worst case, it means Yeah, that these people are displaced, forcibly displaced, impoverished, and so on. So you have in many countries, you have ethnic groups that are simply less privileged than they would belong, right? So it's very exclusive, and nation states really want to keep that very clear who is a citizen and who is not a citizen. So for example, some countries make it also very hard if you want to give up your citizenship. And so some people move to another country, they want to become the citizen of that country, right? So perhaps the country allows them, but the original country makes it very hard. It's actually very difficult to suddenly say, I'm not a US citizen anymore. It's very difficult. Think about several years, many lawyers, a lot of money to get out of it. The same thing actually with Russia. It's difficult to give up Russian citizenship. In many cases, it's very difficult. In many countries, it's very difficult, right? But some people at some point, they live for decades so in another country, they want to become a citizen, right? Full member. And then it's sometimes also depending if they get out of the old citizenship, which is interesting. So they make it also very, very strict. You cannot decide yourself, right, to leave or not leave. If you're a member, once a member, you are a member, right? So you basically, marked. You are this citizen, right? And of course, you know, in the worst case now, it's really about then also like ethnic groups and who is dominating other groups, and you can go back to Nazi Germany and all kinds of concepts that there's like a privileged race that needs more space, right, and that justifies wars and so on. So very often it's connected to this idea also really of, unfortunately, territory and blood and bloodline, right, and race and these things. However, these countries, if you look at them, nation states, almost every country in the world is ethnically diverse. Right? And then you had cases of countries that make exit very difficult, that people of their citizens were not able to leave, right? And other countries make it very difficult that people kind of come into the countries. So borders are really, good. You mentioned that border is really important. we talk a bit more about it. This was actually already so some people, as a scholar, Scandinavian scholar, he has created this definition of marchisans, denizens, and citizens. So the marchisans are people that have, for example, an illegal status. They are not really existing legally in the country. They have it very difficult. They are the margin. Then we have denizens. They are denied a lot of rights because they are not citizens. They are not full members. So in Canada, for example, I'm a permanent resident only. A permanent resident in Canada can do a lot of things. But for example, a permanent resident, what do you think am I not allowed to do in Canada?
To vote?
Yes, to vote. What else?
So to be voted also?
Yes, to be voted in, yeah. I don't want it, but I'm also not allowed to serve in the army, right? To go to military service. What else?
Probably something about property, no? Or is it allowed to?
It's possible, yeah. But in many countries, this is actually also important if you are, a few other things. I would not be able to work for the Canadian FSB or something like that, the Secret Service, right? In that case, actually, Canada is interesting. This is one of the only jobs where you really need to be a citizen by birth, right? You cannot be nationalized as a citizen. Let's say in a few years I'm becoming a Canadian citizen. I can still not work for the Canadian CSIS or CSEC, which are FSB or other agencies translated, right? I could not. My son could, because he's born in Canada, right? He's born, but of course, no, he wouldn't, because he has a second nationality. So they're very strict about that, which makes sense, right? Which makes sense very much, because it's then about what country are you loyal to, right? If you have more passports, it's like a question, right? Or if you have been a citizen of another country before, would you work then for? No, yeah. So there are some professions that are restricted. Yeah. For example, certain benefit in Germany, for example, if you're a permanent resident, yeah, you have access to a lot of benefits if you get unemployed and so on. In some countries, you don't have that, right? And in Germany, for example, you have to prove sometimes that you are still be able to be a permanent resident. This means you still live in the same place, you have enough income, you would test that, right? So I give you one crazy example, which is my own family case. So my wife is Russian citizen, right? So she's still a Russian citizen. We married, she lived in Germany for a long while, and we had to renew each year again the permanent residence status for her, right? We always had to make the case that we are still married, that we are not divorced, but also that we still live under the same address, right? Because we could be simply separated, but legally still be together, right? We had always to bring each year new documents to test that this is still a relation that is existing. If I would have left her, she unemployed, no income, she would have lost permanent residency. She would have had to return, or she would have been deported in the worst case, right? So extreme. And then at some point, and this is the extreme case now about Germany, if you marry someone who is not a German and who is also not a EU citizen, European Union citizen, even myself, I'm disprivileged as a citizen. I'm a second-rank citizen, so to say, in Germany, because if I moved to another place, I had to register, and they looked at me and thought like, okay, you're married to a non-German, you go to OVIR now to register. So our OVIR, right, you know OVIR, right, the office where you would register here in Russia as a foreigner, right, OVIR, or the hotel would report you and register you there. I was always suddenly in this other office where actually all the other people from other countries were, but I'm a German citizen. I just happened to marry someone who's a German citizen. And then, yeah, this is the worst example. So we are almost there. My wife applies for citizenship. We bring folders and documents, because if you want to have the citizenship quickly, I had to prove that I have enough income and that theoretically speaking, I think the last 3 years, theoretically speaking, I could never have asked for any social benefit from Germany. Well, as a German citizen, it's my complete right to ask for, right? Social benefits. But now I'm a second-rank citizen. I have to prove that so that my wife becomes a German citizen. So they tested all that, everything was verified. My wife made then also a citizenship test, so it's like a test and exam. She passed it. She passed that actually some days after the birth of our daughter. So she passed it. She has given birth to a German citizen. She has passed the citizenship. We have all the legal documents. Yeah, one document they still wanted to have is, I have a multi-year work, job, employment, me, right? So I even had that document, but unfortunately had another situation. I was invited to go to Canada for 3 months as a visiting professor, and they know about it, they found out. And then this officer just said, you know what? You go to Canada now, and then you come back, and then we see that you're back, and then we start the process again. Right, so we moved actually with my wife not having any German secure status, we moved to Canada. So she lost permanent residence. Every time we go to Germany or to Europe, we need a visa. Every time, right? It's just like how tough they are and how difficult they make it actually to become, right? And this is now the wife of a German citizen, right? And mother of German citizens, right? And everything is there, right? But simply they want to make it very, very restrictive. So think now about someone who lived now 10 years in Germany, paid taxes, worked everything, you know, and so on, but happens to be Turkish, right? Not German, right? They are in an even more difficult situation, right? If it's already so tough with the partner of a German citizen, right? Which is interesting. So in Canada, it's different, right? So you have a lot of rights yourself. For example, if someone moves to Canada and let's say very often it's you know, the marriage doesn't work or the relationship falls apart or there is domestic violence or something like that, the partner, which is very often then a woman, she can actually keep her status even if she has no income and so on, even if she's protected. In Germany, she would not be protected. So many women actually suffer through a relationship which is abusive, very bad, and so on, just to become permanent resident, to have that status, right? And then they are trapped in this situation, right? And yeah, I mean, and some countries have now realized that yeah, this is not right, right? That one needs to have some other better kind of way of dealing with that. There is something in the scholarly literature, someone has started at some point to speak about post-national citizenship. This is now legally very interesting. If you have an interest in international rights, like international human rights, but also international social rights. Let's speak, for example, about children. There are international conventions that give rights to children even if their parents are illegal migrants, even if their parents are refugees and so on, they have a right to education. Yeah? It's almost, I think it's recognized by almost any country in the world, right? So there have been legal developments at the global stage that give entitlements to people even if they are not citizens, which are universal rights. And someone has called that, a Turkish scholar, she has called it a post-national citizenship, right? Which is of course still a bit of very much an illusion that there would be something like a citizenship of the world, right? But if you talk now about, yes, this one here, European Union passport, well, you have something like a European citizenship legally already. I'm allowed to work in every EU member state, right? I am entitled to get my social benefits in another EU country. So you see a lot of legal developments that go beyond my country, right? I'm allowed to travel without having a visa, right? They're like basic things, but also employment rights, a lot of things. In Europe, you can vote in local elections, right? At the sub-state level. If I move to France, I cannot vote who is the next president of France, right? But I can perhaps vote on a local municipal elections who is the mayor, right? I'm allowed to vote, which is interesting. So many things are there in a way, you know, becoming interesting. It's a different concept of citizenship. And then you have this case of transnational diaspora groups. So the ethnic Germans in ethnic Germans in Germany that once lived in the Soviet Union in different republics and came then to Germany, they are an interesting example. The Turkish group in Germany is an interesting example. Almost every, I mean, the Russian community or the Ukrainian diaspora in Canada is very important as well. You might not know it, but so outside Ukraine, Canada, I think, is the most important country where most Ukrainians live. Like a Ukrainian diaspora is there since long, long time. And right now, there are actually politics in Canada. So Canada, why is Canada in the Ukraine-Russia conflict very much on the Ukrainian side? Because there's a huge Ukrainian diaspora in Canada. They have members of parliament that are from this group. They have many, many relations, and that drives them even Canadian politics, right? So there is a direct link, because there is a huge group, right, which is there since actually decades, right, long-term settlement of Ukrainians. If you go to provinces in Canada like Saskatchewan, they say like everyone is a Ukrainian, or you know, people really, it's very similar even, like a lot of wheat and corn and so on, production and so on in Ukraine. But there are politics then kicking in even today. So the Turkish diaspora in Germany is mobilized by Erdogan, right, for his purposes as well. And there are other diaspora groups in the world that are actually more and more becoming important for the leaders of their countries. So some countries, like India, for example, they have started to issue cards. So they have an Indian diaspora in other countries, and they are not Indian citizens anymore. But the Indian government wants to connect them more closely again to India and to bring them closer. So they issue an Indian card that you are actually a member of the Indian group, right? And this gives you then in certain, I think, states in India, it gives you certain rights as well, right? And that's how countries try to connect again to the diaspora, to the people that have gone abroad. China is doing that as well, because there are many Chinese in many other countries. It's very important, the overseas Chinese. So you have the Mexican diaspora in the US, and also the Hispanic diaspora in the US. And here again, you have to recognize, I mean, like history, right? Many parts that are today the United States have been Mexican territory, right? And the US got it by war or by payments or bought it. So there is actually not an immigrant diaspora, but of course there is a transnational diaspora group formed, which is crossing the border. And in many states of the US, well, Spanish is second language already. Everything is also in Spanish. And one thing that happened a few years back, well, if I would have more time, you can watch it on YouTube actually. There is the national anthem done by, you know these guys, Pitbull and such guys. They sang the US anthem in Spanish. And we played that in a, I think in a, you know, there was like a Super Bowl match or whatever. During the break, it was on TV. And it provoked an outcry because many people were not happy that they were using Spanish because they think it needs to be always English, right? And this is the thing that is very much now changing also US politics. If we think about the next elections, presidential elections, right, at some point further down the road, you will have someone from a Hispanic group or Mexican group that becomes perhaps president of the US. It's very logical because in many states already, members of the House of representative or governors are already have Mexican background, right? Because it's a huge population. And in many counties, even the majority population. It's not that the other groups are the majority, right? It's an ethnic mix in the US. And Spanish-speaking would be absolute majority, but even Mexicans are perhaps more than 50% in a county, right? So they vote on a county level, they vote in the US, they vote the police boss, the sheriff, they vote the local council of the schools, they vote everything, right, on the county level. Well, and this is then ethnic votes, yeah. So, if people like Trump or someone like Obama, if they want to become president or some kind of other office, what they very often do is to travel through the whole U.S., right, to be on the campaign trail, and they target ethnic groups specifically. So everything is done in the languages and so on. They reach out to their ethnic groups. Very likely at some point someone with Asian background becoming president as well in the US, because Asian community is also well connected. Not percentage-wise, right, but connected in business and so on, right? It's very important. So these groups are really important. And Yeah, so we speak about countries that call themselves also immigration countries, like officially as immigration countries. So if I would ask you, what are the typical immigration countries, the traditional countries of immigration, what would come to your mind? I talked already about
USA.
the USA, yeah. By the way, what is that here? The Statue of Liberty, right? What is this here? Anyone ever been in New York? Traveling? Do you know what that is? It's close to Statue of Liberty.
Is it prison?
No, but we
Very
come
close,
to that.
very close.
Anyone? This is Ellis Island. So the big ships with the immigrants on board, 18th, 19th century, right? We came into the harbor. What we saw was the Statue of Liberty. I show you what is actually inscribed in the Statue of Liberty. If you think now about that and Trump, it's totally ridiculous. Right? There's a great video actually on YouTube, Rihanna, Oxygen. It is really about the whole myth of America. You have to watch it. It's great because she also is very critical about the US in this video. So people came in, they saw the Statue of Liberty and they saw Ellis Island. This is the processing center. They were actually processed there. You know what they did? They had in this building, they had stairs and people had to climb up these stairs and there were guys watching them. And if someone was like, they made with the chalk on the back of the cover of that person, they made a sign. This person might have, you know, tuberculosis, or this person might have this one. And then these people were sorted out, checked by a doctor. Well, and if they were unlucky, they were just directly sent back with the ship. So it is like a detention center as well, prison, right? Detention center. But also like, yeah, they had all these questions. So if there was, sorry about that again, if there was a woman traveling alone, they questioned her because they were thinking she might be a prostitute. If there was a guy who was looking very poor, they were like looking at this guy, well, he's poor, why is he poor? Is he perhaps lazy? Why does he come alone? He might be, you know, they didn't use it, not terrorist, right? But that might be a provocator, right? That might be some kind of a guy who creates a union then at some point, or a workers' movement, right? They didn't want that. So they checked the people, including medically, but also like conditions, you know, what was in the luggage, right? What did they bring? And then they sorted out people, and people were actually sent back. And this is the untold story, that many people actually were shifted back. There's a second island close by, where people were also put in quarantine. So they thought like, this person is currently having a fever and so on. We better detain that person for 10 days on this island, make sure that no disease gets into New York or in the US, right? And this person is then detained in this island, right? And then checked again, and if it doesn't improve, again back on the ship, right? So Ellis Island, if you ever come to New York, it's a museum now of immigration. And they have a database. If you have a relative or know someone, or you can check people like, yeah, whatever, famous immigrants, right? You can check actually on their computers the history. And you could find out that, whatever, the great-great-great-grandfather immigrated 1825 because they have everything, like the records, the landing records, right? So you could check, for example, when did Albert Einstein come to the US, right? Because he might not have come to Ellis Island, I'm not sure about it, but they have the database for the United States, right? And it's an important, interesting museum, and it's nicely made because you get at the beginning, when you go there and you pay, right, the entrance, you get a plastic card. You don't know what it is, but it is a history of one real person. And every time you go to a next, you know, museum kind of artifact, you scan it, and then it tells you the story. And at some point, you end up actually in this detention. Yeah, you have these these barbed wire around you, you know, like a fence. And then, yeah, this person, you have this person was actually not allowed in because the person was accused to be this and that, right? So basically your story is over, right? You can play with this card basically the whole situation through. You can climb up the stairs and so on. It's very interesting. But there are many more museums now, but this is like one of the most known. In Canada there's also a museum like that. So yes, the US, Canada would be second. Yeah? Canada would be also a traditional country of immigration. These two, flag looks almost the same.
Great Britain.
No. Australia and New Zealand. Well, Australia is known for what? It was also an immigration country for what? Now you, the gentleman back there, it was a prison island of the whole Commonwealth, right? He sent
from Great Britain there.
Yes, yes, they sent the whole bad guys there, right? And later, of course. Yeah, but it is a traditional immigration country as well as New Zealand as well. So these four usually are counted as the traditional immigration countries. What makes them immigration countries? Well, settler societies, actually all the outcome of the Commonwealth, of the English Empire, right? Colonized countries, people brought there to settle the country, right? So in Canada, the logic to get each year 400,000 people in is very much still the logic of we want to colonize the rest of the country. And I mean, it's detrimental for the so-called, in Canada we call them First Nations, the people that own the country, that are the Aboriginal, indigenous population. And in many cases in the US, in Australia it's the same. And you have also the American Indians, of course, in the US, and you have this problem also of this colonialism. And so, but these countries define themselves officially as immigration countries. US, we can doubt more and more, right? The rhetoric of the president is not like that. But Canada considers itself as an immigration country and officially as a multicultural country. And multiculturalism is actually an ideology of Canada. So many countries hate, don't like, don't want this term of multicultural country, right? They do not define themselves. They define themselves as German country, Germany, right? Or Russia would be the same. We would have a preference for Russian citizens, right? For Russian groups. But in the case of Canada, it is totally other ideology. Is like everyone from all over the country, all over the world, brings something to Canada which is valuable and makes the country move forward. We appreciate that everyone is different and so on. So this is the ideology of Canada, multiculturalism, to benefit. And they had actually a policy at some point that they would bring in more of the people that are less represented in the society, just to make it as multi as possible. Yeah. So what is on the United States, the Statue of Liberty, right? It's this very, actually the song of Rihanna is not the new Oxygen, it's I think the new Colossus, I don't know, Oxygen I probably think. You could check Rihanna and it's an interesting video. So there is this very famous sentence, yeah, on this statue, because this statue, as you know, was built in France. It was a gift of France to the United States, right? So they got this Statue of Liberty from France, and then an American poet wrote a poem, The New Colossus, which is in the harbor of New York, the Statue of Liberty, and it says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your clinging shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." Golden door, right? Like that's the American dream, the golden, new country, you know, the new world. It's also called the new world, right? It's really saying, bring me your poor, right? Bring me the refugees, bring me all these things. this is not Trump policy, right? This is not officially Donald Trump now, right? This is completely the opposite of it, right? And of course, they were always selective also in the US. I mean, if you go through Ellis Islands, you see that they were selective and they didn't let everyone. So if we look now, what are the most important immigration countries? By percentage or by volume? So receiving. By far, the United States, by far the most important immigration country. Still today. Saudi Arabia, number 2. In numbers. Why that? Because Saudi Arabia brings in a lot of foreign labor to work in oil. They do not work themselves there in oil, right? So a lot of the oil states, so Saudi Arabia is, because it's also a big country, the number of migrants is simply very high. But you have countries like Qatar, where 90% of the population are immigrants and not Qataris. Here, the thing, they do not have rights, right? They have very little rights, actually. So you have 3 Germany, you have 4 Russian Federation, you have 5 UK. So Russian Federation, perhaps you're shocked now to see that, or confused, or you know. No, because Russia also counts a lot of people in international migration statistics that have never migrated to Russia, because after the collapse of the Soviet Union, a lot of people that are counted in international migration statistics are Ukrainians and other of the post-Soviet republics, right? So Russia has, you know, there is some, the truth is somewhere in between in the scale, right? So that is a difficult case. You have the UK, you can explain United Kingdom because of the former colonies, right? Of course, this country was the most globalized and connected. It has logically a lot, right? Yeah, then you come already to a very tiny country, which is the United Arab Emirates. Then you have France, then you have Canada, Australia, Spain, Italy, and so on, right? So this is interesting, this statistic, or these absolute numbers, right? If you look at the percentage, right, I mean, this is extreme. United Arab Emirates, 80% population of immigrants. Kuwait, also very high. You have a question? Sorry, ask. No, please ask. Don't shy. Okay. Any other questions? Really tell me if you have a question. Yeah, this is the total population, right, in relation to percentage. By the way, you will all get these PowerPoint slides. What is her name? The administrator. She will give you this PowerPoint. The lady that switched on this camera. She told me you will get a PowerPoint from her, like everyone, right? So you will have that. Then you can look at these. So we talk always about the migration refugee crisis. This ship and these people, you might think now that was 2015-16. No. That is actually Albania, leaving Albania when communism collapsed in Albania, and Albania was suddenly open. Because Albania had actually, there's a book of him, Midnight Children. It describes how the British Empire fell apart into Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India. Overnight, Midnight Children, right? And suddenly there were 3 countries. And it was massive displacement, right? Forced displacement, violent, many issues, right? So there were many instances in world history that had refugee or migration crisis, right? So it's really plural. It's not what happened 2015-16. And if you would go to other regions of the world, countries, if you would go to Africa, well, they would look at Europe and say like, yeah, we have that decades, this is like reality. We have a lot of refugees and migration crises, right? So it's a very important to say that there are a lot of migration refugee crises, if you could call it like that. And very often it has to do that the country is collapsing, or what you see simply is also the interventions of foreign military powers, right? If you think now about Iraq, Afghanistan, and so on, that are followed by massive displacement. So some people in Germany say like, well, we get all these people from other countries as refugees to our countries. We have not caused these wars, right? We are not responsible, why? But people ask that, right? It's a fair question actually. That other countries then have to take the burden, right? Because they're close by. They're not going to the US, right? That's far away, there's oceans between. That is the interesting thing now, because you had this question also about Canada. Canada simply has the advantage. North Pole, US, very restricted, and two huge oceans. They can very easily say, oh yeah, we want to have this and that, but this person we don't want to have, right? They can pick and choose, right? They are not overwhelmed by sudden arrival. Europe has simply a far more complex geography, right? It's far more complex. It's not easy to deal with that. So there's always this question that, yeah, Angela Merkel, what did she do when there was the refugee crisis, right? Well, the reality is, the interesting question would be, what could she have done, right? So there's more and more research into this question, because people were stranded in Hungary and many other countries that surround Germany and Austria. And then there was this phone call on a Friday evening of Viktor Orban to the German and the Austrian Chancellor, and just saying, we are opening the borders in 2 hours, the trains will be leaving on Friday evening. One, I think, I don't know, Interior or Justice Minister of Germany was actually in the hospital, in the surgery, whatever. They had to appoint quickly someone else to act. The other minister had to act on behalf. And it was a total confusion. They had a few hours left. What would you do? There is no border between Germany and Austria anymore, right? There's no police force, there's no border guards. What would you do? Well, in other countries, just look at the example now of the US. Someone is calling in the military over weeks and weeks, and then at some point there is the military. The US is not able to send that military that quickly to the border, right? So if you have the genuine question would be, what could she have done, or what could have leaders done? It was too late. They would have to have stopped migration or refugee movements way earlier, right? In Turkey, or before coming over the Mediterranean, but not in continental Europe, where there's no border. Well, and then think about German history, or Austrian, for that matter. German and Austria being together, yeah, under the Third Reich. Two world wars caused by Germany, concentration camps, all that. If Germany would put up detention centers around the border, the whole media of the world would call them in one instant concentration camps. If Germany would call in shooting order at the border, like Trump wants to do sometimes, I mean, this is almost, it's impossible with German history, having caused 2 world wars, right? Out of history, you can imagine that this is not an option, right? So I mean, like really seriously asking the question, if someone says like, well, she did that, and you know, she took in all these people. Well, the reality is she didn't. She was overwhelmed. That was not a decision by her. She was overwhelmed, and then she was standing there and saying, "We will manage. We will manage." Right? That is this historic sentence she did. Right? So the real story, the tough question would be, what would the country do if you're suddenly facing up with that situation, right? And many countries don't have an answer for that. Because, I mean, think about your own country, think about other countries. Would that be likely that the military would shoot at people at the border, right? It would be an outcry in the whole world community, right? It is almost possible. How to stop a massive flow of people? What we see now with the US-Mexico border is you have walls, you have everything already, you have high technology, you have thousands of soldiers and border guards and so on, but still people come. because there's a basic law basically of migration studies. If you erect a wall, they will find a way around the wall, right? They will always find another method. The only thing is, it's not an easy thing. It gets more expensive for migrants, and it gets more dangerous. So if you want to think about that, more people will go into selling themselves, their bodies, their organs, whatever, or they will take more risks, and more people go through deserts, get heat strokes, snake bites, and everything. It gets more dangerous, more people get killed. That is the outcome, right? So it's very difficult to say what countries should then do. So one critical question would be, what would a country do if they want to really control migration and refugee movements? Because it links back to a question now, remember earlier today, we are not really clear how to call people even, in a way, how to categorize people, right? We're not sure, absolutely certain, when to call someone a migrant or a refugee. And you see that if you're a critical observer, look at media reports, because sometimes, in one line they say migrants, and in the second line they say refugees, and they just mix it, because the journalists are not sure about it. Also political leaders, it's very difficult, yeah. But you make, of course, a bold statement. So I'll give you one interesting example. Canada and the US. Many people try to leave the US now. I don't know your name, but the lady here, you refer to it. So many people try to come from the US to Canada, also as refugees now, from Haiti and other groups that were actually for a long time in the US. They try to get into Canada. Canada is not used to have refugees at the border. Canada is always taking the people from far away, bringing them to Canada. Suddenly, there's an increasing number. They request asylum at the border between Canada and the US. So think about Canada being so close to the US. You don't hear that people, politicians, they totally avoid that in Canada, to call these people refugees or asylum seekers. They call them illegal migrants, illegal arrivals, and so on. Because if they would say these people have a right to asylum, they would make a statement very bold about the US relations with Canada, right? That would provoke Trump to react, to respond. So the relations very complicated at that moment between Canada and the US, right? And you might have heard about NAFTA, the new NAFTA agreement 2.0, how Canada was basically pushed in, and Mexico and US took a lead, and then Canada had to sign up. They tried to, well, they don't want to sign that, but they didn't achieve a lot, I think, in my perspective. It was a very strange process, actually. And the thing about migration and refugees arriving now suddenly at the Canada border, they try to do that as discreetly as possible. Who to let's stay in Canada, we don't really hear so much, but there's a lot of rhetoric about that topic, right? And many from the conservative and so parties, they are concerned about border control, border security. Yeah, you have two leaders actually, Trump and Trudeau. They are very much on social media both. And Trump is always like, refugees, Canada is for you, and so on. So he made very bold statements on Twitter, and also like that. a few days ago, he donated Trevor Noah's organization like 50 million Canadian dollars through a Twitter feed, right? And some excuse him, yeah, this is the same basically. What quality of politics is that, right? Twitter politics are very important, but also in this topic of refugees and migrants. So someone responded directly when the US, Trump, imposed all these immigration restrictions on certain countries, travel ban and so on. Canada, Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, responded with a Twitter feed. Canada will be open to refugees and so on, right? But the reality is, it's not open. right? They try also to limit it as possible as they can. So it's there are official politics and there are also symbol politics, right? And there's like statements and so on. Let's have another break. And I think we'll take 15 minutes and then we'll do the last round. Yeah. And China is doing that now with a lot of international students. China is becoming a very, very important destination for international students. I was a few weeks ago, I was teaching in Beijing, and it was very interesting because it was an international program, and these people were from all over the world, really, all over the world. And what was very interesting, a lot of people were from also Central, actually Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, a lot of former post-Soviet countries. And what they often said, these students, was, I had no chance to go to Europe, I had no chance to go to the US, they don't let us in, they don't accept us, China does. And China allows them also to work on the side, to work in companies while they study, then to keep them stay in China, right? So China has basically adopted very much the policy. And Canadian, in the refugee area of Canada, one thing is also important. So Canada has simply this advantage of quotation mark, of being shielded by two oceans, and then the West and then the North Pole, right? So no one is really so easily coming to Canada. So what they do on the refugee side, humanitarian side, is sponsored refugee resettlement. Means if you are a group of individuals in Canada and you like to help people, you can form this group and you can, as private citizens, you can sponsor a refugee to come to Canada. Means this community takes care of a refugee or family. The family comes in and it has the support of society already, which is totally different from Germany, for example, where a refugee comes in, has no support, right? Because this community helps this person to integrate, right? And takes responsibility that it works, which is interesting. But of course, Canada has the advantage to be able to choose, right? So my university, for example, in Canada, what they do since many years, it's actually very interesting. All my students, they pay fees to university, tuition. And some part of the tuition money is going to sponsor each year, I think 1 or 2 refugee students that are somewhere in the world in a refugee camp, to allow these students to come to Canada to continue studies. So they sponsor every year 2 students. And basically there's a whole community again, right? So students take care of that student and so on. And the student is not alone, it's not helpless, right? While you have that in some countries that are simply overwhelmed or flooded, if you want to say that, by refugees. There's no support for these people, right? But here you have in Canada, you have a support system from society that people actually voluntarily do it, yeah? Which is then of course helping the integration, that there's less social problems and so on. Not to say that there are no social problems, they are, right? But it's much easier, a much better system, I would say. So this is like perhaps 2 cases. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, welcome. Any questions? So one thing, of course, a country, a government leader, if you want to really, if you really want to adopt a policy, design a policy that works, right? Of course, always you need to understand what actually is happening first, right? You need to know why there is migration. You need to know why people come. And this is the, unfortunately, very difficult part of it, There's no easy answer to this either, because we cannot really say that someone is only moving because of whatever. What you really often see is something. A refugee comes to another country, yes, because there's political persecution, but at the same time, this person has the means, has some financial resources already to make it even to another country, right? It's not a poor person, it might be a middle class member that is able to afford it. So this person, you can very easily assume, has also second and third motives, right? So had perhaps always the dream to live in another country, had not the same income, wants to have more income, right? And there's something coming together. Several things come together and a decision is taken. That is probably 95% of all cases of migration refugees. Many different aspects come together and then it happens, right? And then there are so many factors why it happens then, right? And how it happens. So, own experience perhaps, you know, I would never have thought that I marry a Russian, B, you live in another country, and C, and so on, that this is Canada. I would not have thought about it. Perhaps the US, perhaps Switzerland, but not Canada, right? So several factors came together and played out in a certain way. And of course, 20 years ago, to prognose that, my case, it's impossible. How would you build a theory that explains it, right? You would end up with a theory that is simply so broad, right? Okay, you have this amount of unemployment and this income differential, you know, perhaps you could start designing something. But you always have, if you have taken economics classes, you have always this principle of this homo economicus, who would rationally plan it, right? Who would take a market optimal decision, right? Not a person, right? Someone who just says, the income is higher there and the income is lower here, so I go, of course, there where the higher income is. But of course this person has no family, has no other, you know, aspirations, motivations, nothing. It's not a social being, right? So that doesn't work, right? These homo economicus explanations. Rather, you would have someone which you could call a satisficer, who has simply different agendas. One would be market optimism, have more income, have a far higher likelihood of being employed in a good job. Going to another country, having a better education, then prepares me to get a better job, while here I can't, or something like that, right? Has several agendas. But, yeah, at some point, this person is perhaps set to go, has all the papers, and yeah, well, something else happens, right? And the person switches from one moment to the other, the whole decision planning, right? Something happens, and it's not going that way, right? So, yeah, it's very difficult to combine that in one theory, right? So you would end up with something which is probably not very much usable. And so it's so difficult to explain it. So if it's so difficult to explain it, yeah, how do you govern or regulate or politically, you know, how are your laws or policies working, right, if it's so difficult to explain? You can only regulate certain aspects of it, right? And what countries then very often do, they have certain instruments, right? They have visa policies. Okay, in order to get a visa, you have to perhaps show your credit card, you have to perhaps do this and that and so on, right? You have several obligations, and then you are granted a visa. And of course, you can then manipulate some parts of it, right? You have to have a minimum income of that, you have this and that, and so on. Then you are more likely to get the visa or something like that, right? But this is only one tool, right? You can increase border security, but if you increase border security, you have the other effect that you increase illegal migration, because the illegal migration will go up, as well through your border security. Because if you make it more difficult, that drives the people to organize crime, to smugglers, right? And there's another business then created, which is an illegal business, right? So it's difficult to regulate that then. So you need basically a mix of different tools and practices. So one thing, if I would ask, what are the instruments countries use? Well, think about that Donald Trump now built the wall, right? So there's the wall. The matter of fact is, that is the wall, right? The walls are there already, but people climbed over it. There were very nice pictures you can find on the internet, like they built a ramp from one side, or two cars in the middle of the night, they come together at the border and just go like that. Or two ladders, right? On one side and then over. So, yeah, walls are right now more and more popular again, right? Very few countries combine walls with mines, right? Or with shooting devices or something like that. There are very few borders where you have mines, right? So historically we had examples, right? But the US is not thinking about building mines or shooting devices, and hopefully not. Yeah. So another tool would be, of course, what you know, right? You go through this border checkpoint at the airport or somewhere else. And yeah, France, you have the people then with the rifle now, or because there's terror alert. And you have then a division also. Some citizens can go this line, another line. I'm very happy when I go to European Union, because with that biometric passport I have, if I'm traveling alone, not with my Russian wife, I just go through the border, right? Like I scan and I'm through. I'm through the border in less than 10 seconds at Frankfurt International Airport, right? Because it just takes a picture of my iris, it just compares it and it's through, right? And I'm through, right? And in other countries, so in Singapore and South Korea, what they have actually, you have in this passports, you have an RFID chip, right? It has all the information. They have scanners. You walk through the airport, they scan you, and the door opens simply for you. You don't even have to show the passport, you don't even have to whatever. It just scans you because they have cameras all over. That camera would scan me and it would see that is him, right? Crazy, yeah, the technology. Yeah, the passport, right? And that is the symbol, the biometric symbol. You know also, I don't know if you have a biometric passport, but if, yeah, for example, if you're outside Russia and you're a Russian citizen and you need your passport quickly, you don't get a biometric. That was for a longer while the case. Now you get also biometric, right? And then I think also the one I think that is for 10 years is now biometric, but if you have only one for 5 years validity, it's not biometric or whatever, right? In some countries around the European Union, Albania, Bosnia, Serbia, and so on, yeah, they were forced by the European Union to get biometric passports. If you have a biometric passport and you're a citizen of Serbia, you can travel to the European Union without a visa. But if you don't have a biometric passport, you need to have a visa. So guess what? Of course, everyone wants to have a biometric visa. And of course, this plays in all the people that want to control flows, right? Because they want to have everything biometric. And you can think now, more and more further down the road. If your passport is biometric, you want to have perhaps your birth certificate biometric, your marriage certificate biometric, right? There's a whole market around it evolving. And some people say, like, I showed you the wall, I showed you the border cross point. Well, the chip, but the border is actually your eyes, your eyeballs are the border, right? Because all of your fingers, the fingerprints. But actually the iris is your border. You carry the border with you, right? Because sometimes you get access and sometimes not. And it's getting more and more sophisticated. So even iris or whatever, speaking now about spice and so on, like James Bond, whatever. You can put like contact lenses, I was told, and so on. You can fake. Yeah, you can fake. But what you do now is a scan of all the blood vessels in your face to have that as a second generation. And even with plastic surgery and whatever, your whole face and so on remodeled, you cannot, because it's all the blood vessels, the whole head, right? Which is scanned. And then in the past, or in this literature. So this is going to be very difficult. So you have these very fancy, yeah, this is something, I just scan it goes through, right? And it takes this picture of you, it moves up automatically, takes the pictures, and door opens and you're through. And then you have, of course, IT systems. Databases are very important, more and more. You have probably heard about the Schengen Information System. If you apply for a Schengen visa, everything is going through this database. They track and they know if you have ever overstayed in Schengen country, right? Also fingerprints, there's Eurodac, there are systems connected, right? Many people say that, I don't know when you book your flight tickets, this is now Russia, so it might be different, but as soon as you would go on Expedia or something like that and book a flight ticket, or Google, let's say, Google tells you a flight, right? You book it. Some people say their US border security starts because already they track what credit card is used, where is it used, all the data points are put together, right? They have a complete picture of you already when you start buying a flight ticket. They try to find out about your intentions, right? So data systems are more and more important. What else would they do? Well, this is Switzerland now. This is very interesting. This is a ceremony where let's say you would live in Switzerland since a long time now already. You would like to become a Swiss citizen. You would apply to the mayor. The mayor office would call an election on you. So all the people of the village would come together. What is your name? Yeah? Okay, so they would say, should she become a citizen of Switzerland? And then they would say, yeah, no, I'm not in favor, yes, I'm in favor. And people can actually make submissions to the mayor and say, let's say, right, this person in the morning never greets me. I don't think she should become a citizen, or something like that. Or, this person always, pays and gives a lot of tips, right? Yeah, should become a citizen, right? So all kinds of things are possible. So, of course, you have an advantage if you look West European, Slavic, or whatever. If you are there and you look African, there are a lot of other politics to gain, right? If you're Muslim and so on, right? But some people are, of course, absolutely preferred over others, right? So they vote, they can vote, right? In some communities. Well, and then you have asylum hearings, right? Where you can try to get asylum. Yeah, testing for true love. that is interesting. If you would fall in love with someone and then you would think you go to another country, some countries impose on you, like you need to have a marriage visa. You need to have a special visa to be allowed to marry, right, in another country. They make it super hard for you to apply for a regular visa. So again, own experience. If you are a Russian female between 18 and 40, you are classified by many countries in the European Union in a certain risk group. You are basically, they are not sure if this is a fake marriage. They just assume it's a fake marriage. So you need to make a case that it's not a fake marriage. In my case, what they could have done is something really nasty. If you, and I have friends that went through this process. So here in Moscow, you would be called in to the German embassy, and at the same time, exactly the same time, the other partner is called in Germany to the office, and both are asked the same questions. And then they ask me, what's the name of his uncle? where does his uncle live? Or what is her favorite dish? And so on. You know something about it?
But isn't about that. It isn't about knowledge of the uncle.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But they would do that. And what we did, actually, we already we had advice from some lawyers, right? They already told us, collect pictures, write each other letters, not emails, because emails, you know, is electronic. Write real letters. Send letters to your parents, to your family. Yes, you know, we met, we are engaged, whatever. Make a whole story. Collect all these artifacts. They ask you perhaps like, how much was that ring? You know, something like that. They ask even totally intimate question, right? Like they shouldn't ask, but they ask these things in these hearings, right? And then they're checked. And it's actually very tough to get through it because they can ask stupid questions you don't know, right? Who's the second uncle of the whatever, right? Right. Very extreme case. In some countries, unfortunately, certain countries are really, really under this as well, or female again. Australia at some point had instructions to Australian border guards. They went through the baggage of female American travelers and they looked at the type of the underwear that was in the female baggage. If there was a lot of lingerie, dessous, whatever, they assumed it is an escort or is a trafficked victim or whatever, forced prostitution, whatever. No access, no entry. They really had these instructions. And then you have refugee resettlement. That is also about a child arriving as a refugee getting the Canadian flag, right? So you have also this process. You have targeted recruitment where you apply, this is Canada as well, you place a profile, then you're linked to a pool of labor. Someone can draw you and say, I need that person, and then you're through and you get permanent residence. So Canada has this stepwise process. It's called express entry. You can get permanent residency within 1 year, right? 3 more years, you're a citizen. Then the other instruments, soon finished, would be, of course, the restrictive instruments. You want to get rid of people, right? You don't want. You detain them, and this is what you heard in the US case, right? Detention. Then the next one would be deportation on flights. Handcuffed, send it back. And the issue is then, they have all these tools, but the policies very often fail anyway. Well, because it's so complex to regulate migration. And as all these policies, very often the answer here is as well, because all the policies, you know, think about taxation or whatever, all policies, if you look in detail, they are very complicated, right? It's more, the details are always complicated. Because you have simply social dynamics in this migration process, right? Then you have also, migration policies have very much to do with wars, no wars, underdeveloped countries, poor countries, rich countries, you know, global inequality, right? It's very globalization as well, which is simply working to put together also sanctions, right? Could also be a part of it, right? Many different policies that overlap. And then you have simply complex political systems. So one political leader would say, yes, we want no immigration, right? But at the same point, at the same time, Donald Trump has people that donate money to his campaign, which are in business that depend on immigrant labor. And he might travel to another state, he will run there, and he will say, you said something against immigration, I need farm workers, right? So it's much more complex because there's more and more things coming together. So migration is simply very, very complex to control. And I end here now this lecture. What countries have done, that is also a very interesting point, aspect of it. Well, countries have started more and more to work together to control migration, right? Have joined forces, and they include more and more other actors in controlling migration. One one component you already saw was private companies as well, because detention in the US is private companies, right? The prison system is almost a private system. Deportation is private companies. The IT systems, yeah, there's a lot of industry involvement. You have also NGOs that sponsor refugees, let's say refugee politics. You have then international organizations that help. So it's from a political standpoint, it's very interesting because it's logic that countries that cannot regulate it themselves, right, look beyond, right, and try to involve other countries first, and then try to involve others. So the European Union, for example, is cooperating with the Russian Federation to control migration. There is cooperation in this matter, right? And it's through organizations like the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, International Organization for Migration, and so on, that these two blocks basically cooperate, right? So there's a lot of policies or developments going on despite all other policies, right, that are perhaps not on the same page, so to say. There's a lot going on between countries. All right, thanks so much for your attention, and I hope, yeah, that was kind of interesting. And what I wanted to do is, like, very quickly, in case you want, my email is actually here. In case you want to send me an email, please do so. And I hope to see you very soon again when I come, hopefully back to Moscow. And thanks so much.